Hey everybody out in Facebook land, here we are on the Louisiana and Arkansas, masquerading as Kansas City Southern 503 in Port Arthur, Texas. We have raised already $9,000. $9,000 in less than 24 hours. We've had Jimmy Lesiak of Over the Top Construction step up and offer his services at cost to move the locomotive from here to his temporary home in Rusk, Texas State Railroad. We have had the Orlando and Northwestern Railway Company operating the Royal Palm Railway Experience in Orlando reach out to us and express their desire to provide a home for this locomotive and to fund its restoration to operation. So we have a company that's generously donated all of their profit away from the move of this locomotive out of the park. We have a railroad that's desiring to operate it and pay for its restoration starting later this year. But right now, we've got to get it out of the park, and we're still not out of the woods in that regard yet. We're here, Nick Hovey and I,
hey guys,
in Port Arthur, marking out appliances to save in case we're not successful. As morbid of a thing as this is, we're marking out what to save and where to cut. I can honestly tell you that in all the years I've been working on steam locomotives, nothing has pained me more than to have to mark out areas on the boiler to cut around the mounting brackets of appliances so the appliances can be saved. And you know, it's a necessary thing, because while we have every faith things work out, there's no guarantee. And at the end of the day, if the locomotive ends up not being moved out of here, we want to at least salvage what is usable on it for other preservation efforts. But we're not going to let that happen. We as a community are not going to let that happen, right? There is such an outcry over the fact that this locomotive was destined to be scrapped. People were calling for all sorts of things, contacting the city, getting in touch with elected officials, getting in touch with the scrapper, which of course we already have. They've already cut all the lube lines, so that's good. And hey, we came down here. Nick needs it. All right. But yeah, so here we are. We have everything set up. There is a plan. Everybody is agreeable to it. The owner of the locomotive, we just need the money to get out of here. And so people have been asking a number of questions. So if we're not successful, if the rail preservation community is not successful in preserving this locomotive and raising the funds to save it, then what happens to all the money? Well, simply put, the money will be given back to the people it was donated by, or they can have us pass it along to another institution. We can't let it come to that. This locomotive has a future. It's got a defined future. It just needs to get out of this precarious situation that it's in right now. So the GoFundMe site is in the comments. Oh, it's not an easy one to get up into since it's missing all of its steps. The GoFundMe site's in the comments. Again, $9,000. We have raised $9,000 in less than 24 hours, which is amazing. People started donating before there was even any kind of a plan. Before there was any kind of a plan other than moving it out. We now have a place to take it to for the interim and a tourist railroad desiring to operate it.
Taking the firing manifold too?
Yes, we are. We need to save the firing manifold.
Just in case.
Yep. This market for the cut it. Yep. There you go. All the pipes. We have 3 days left. Hey, Russell Newman, thanks. Just help by sharing a link of the GoFundMe to help save number 503 on steamlocomotive.info. Yeah, absolutely, that will help.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. And you know, along those lines, it takes a lot of people to successfully do something like this. And you know, even if somebody's not a steam fan, even if somebody's not a preservationist per se, a rail fan, many people have an appreciation for history. So, you know, everybody who is a rail enthusiast, a preservationist, a historian, a history geek like myself, then by all means, reach out to your friends, to your neighbors, co-workers, call them up. Ask them to donate $100, $50, $20. Every little bit helps. And you know, if you think about it, it really doesn't take that many people. We've had $9,000 in contributions come in just a few short hours. Really, about 20 at this point. 20 hours, we've raised $9,000. We got to continue it. And yeah, I feel, if anybody's had the thought, believe me, I feel kind of like Jerry Lewis doing a telethon here. But it's kind of the same thing. We're struggling to raise money for a very worthy cause. So, you know, share this video, share the sentiment with, again, your co-workers, anybody you know, neighbors. Do people still talk to neighbors anymore? God, I sure hope so. We don't talk to our neighbors nearly enough. This would be a good opportunity. Hey, Joe, you know, there's this great thing going on in Texas. Open up a dialogue with your neighbor. But we've got to save this locomotive. It is one of a kind. It's one of a kind in that the only other surviving example of a 10-wheeler this large is in Cookeville, Tennessee, and is absolutely thrashed. There is no operating potential for it. And it's owned by a city. It's on display. So, you know, there's that too. But this locomotive desperately needs to be saved. So people ask some questions. There's 15 people watching only. Last night we had almost 80 at one point. Ask some questions. Surely people have some questions about something going on with this locomotive. Well, I suppose then, does not need to come to salvaging parts off of this machine. And it won't, right? Because everybody who is outraged over this potential scrapping, the imminent scrapping of this locomotive, is donating money. Surely. I've donated. Ross Rowland has donated. Robert Franzen, Jason Johnson, Stephen Harvey. A multitude of people from the railroad industry, from the steam preservation industry, have gotten together and donated. Some people, you know, it's Facebook, you forget you even know some folks because you've never met them in person. There have been innumerable phone calls I've received. Where will it be operated? Ben Dennis. It will be operated in Florida, outside of Orlando, on the Orlando and Northwestern Railroad, which is based out of Tavares, Florida. It's a tourist operation. Really, really, really great tourist operation. Had our first Polar Express last year. Well, I say our. They had their first Polar Express last year. I'm looking to the future, see, because the engine's going to be there, so it's our.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Had their first Polar Express last year. Went really well. It'll be even better this year. And, you know, nothing completes a Polar Express operation like a steam locomotive to pull the train. We've had...
1225.
Yeah, could even wear a 1225 magnet. Absolutely. No, Ben, the previous incarnation of that operation shut down due to a multiple of issues, but the new operator has had nothing but just raging success, which is a wonderful thing. We always like to hear people having a good go at things in this industry, right? But yeah, so some of the things I was talking about last night with this locomotive that make it kind of unique. It received a lot of work really late. For those that didn't see any of the stuff last night, some of the things I was pointing out were the axles. You can make it out here. 2 of 41. So they axles were replaced. All of them have the same month and year date on them. Not necessarily the same day, but the same month and year. Yeah, all got replaced very late, not too long before it came out of service. So for anybody that doesn't know, all the markings on the ends of axles, I mean, some of the things are obvious, like, you know, you have the very crude R and B, you know, right back for the axle position. So obviously 2 of 41, 9.5 inches. That's the journal diameter. When new, it was 9.5 inch journal diameter, because that was a way for an inspector, whether it be a railroad or federal or whatever, to easily identify what the original diameter of the axle was. And no, I'm not bleeding if anybody's wondering. That's some of the red paint for marking where to cut, unfortunately. And then 140 tons, that's what the tonnage was, as the hey, Ben Dennis, you donated. You're a good guy. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Ben.
That was the tonnage that was required to actually force the wheel onto the axle. Now, the Kansas City Southern, like I said, you know, it's lettered for that, but it wasn't actually maintained by them. It was maintained by the Louisiana and Arkansas. They must have had somebody that was really big on welding. Only locomotive I've ever seen, well, no, that's not true. I've seen one other. The Chattahoochee Valley 21 at the Southeastern Railway Museum in Duluth, Georgia. The left front flange is welded up kind of like this, but on this locomotive, every single flange has weld buildup, which doesn't matter because the tires are really thin anyway. The profile is not too bad because it's been welded up. In this case, quite irregularly. You can see it's really blended well here, and you had a big step here. But anyway, welding on wheels, or axles for that matter, is absolutely prohibited by federal law. So the tires will have to be replaced, which again is no big loss. They're real thin. There's not enough material to ever turn them again. So on the spring rigging, again last night I pointed this out, but the springs were new in 4 of 49, which is really late. Really, really late in the steam era. This spring rigging shows basically no wear. The pins are centered in their fits. You can see, maybe you can't see, there's not a lot of light, but they're fairly centered in their fits. Granted, there's probably some corrosion, but nonetheless, it's a matter of replacing pins and bushings, which is cheap. All of the spring hangers, these blades, some people call them, that go down to the equalizing levers inside of the frame, are made up out of weldments. Normally they'd be forgings. Now this is actually how the 765's new spring hangers were made, 3 years ago, I suppose. We had a couple of them develop cracks, so we opted to replace all of them. Now, the way you fabricate one for forging is you start off with a solid piece of plate. This one's nominally 4 inches wide and about 3/4 of an inch thick, and they added on another piece of 3/4 inch material to create a boss to not only support the bushing, but to space it out from the frame. Mainly, you know, it's required for bearing surface area. But yeah, so weldment spring hangers. I've only seen these in blueprints or in modern day restoration practice, never on a, you know, locomotive as it came out of service from the original railroad. So as you can see, the springs, they have been basically encased in paint. And despite the corrosion that's been seen elsewhere on this engine, the springs are in really good shape. They won't even require replacement. They just need to be exercised and inspected and should be able to continue on being used for years to come. So even the back sides, they do not look bad. I mean, yeah, they've got rust on them, obviously, but they're not horrible. So yes, the locomotive is in really good shape. It's got a lot of unique features, and Nick just pointed something out, and you can speak up anytime, Nick. You don't have to be covert. And you pointed out, I'm not a glory hog here.
Hey, whenever Hurricane Harvey or Tropical Storm Harvey hit this area, what really started causing problems for this locomotive was floodwaters starting to spread oil that had leaked from the tender and a little bit of asbestos that had dripped loose. That's what got the state environmental protection agency's attention. And I just happened to notice here, down on the driver tires, you can see where the high water mark for this was. So thankfully, during this last flooding, that's all the higher the water got. That's below all of the main journals on the driving axles. May have caused some problems on the lead truck, maybe in the tender trucks, but for the most part, the hardest journals to deal with are going to be relatively easy to fix, hopefully.
Right, yeah, and that's the highest the water has ever been seen here. They've talked with a lot of people from the area. None of them have ever seen, hey, Matt Olmsted, you donated. That's awesome. Tom Dillon, how is Tom? One of my favorite people in steam preservation. He is such an awesome fellow. Those who don't know him, well, by gosh, you need to go to Rolog in general and get to know everybody from the traction engine world. Tom's an awesome person. He's helped design a number of boilers for steam tractors and even a locomotive boiler. So he's really cool fellow to be around. You know, as Nick pointed out, yeah, oh hey, there you go. There's your water level. There's your water level from the flood. Now the line on the wheel, if you can see a point to it, just to make sure everybody can see it, Nick.
Yeah, the water level's right here, just under the center line of the axle, actually.
Yeah. So that's actually, oddly enough, created in part anyway from the crude oil or bunker C or whatever it was that has
been in the tender since this locomotive was retired in 1957.
Right, and it's ruptured and been leaking out. So, you know, a component of the restoration of this locomotive, you know, whether or not I have anything to do with it, I don't know. I mean, at the point where it's put into the hands of a not-for-profit, it's their deal. Right. But I would imagine, modern day being what it is, that the thing would get roller bearings anyway. It needs new wheels. You look at how thin they are, poor wheel profile, flanges thinning.
Welded up too.
Oh yeah, no, Nick's right. Nick's absolutely right. Look, more weld. They had somebody that was just really, really in love with welding, huh? Let's see, I'm happy to share this on Steam Railway Magazine and Heritage Railway Magazine here in the UK. Hey, Russell, awesome. That's great. That's awesome. Do it, absolutely, man. Every little bit of awareness helps. Here you go. Here you go. Here's some railroad stampings. Hey, look at this. 503. Somebody marked the step ladder so it wouldn't get mixed up in the shop.
And there's some really neat little tidbits you can find on this locomotive, just in casting numbers and whatnot. Kind of try to tell part of the story of this thing. Up there on the marker brackets, just on the sides of the spoke box, there we've got Kansas City Southern casting mark in them. But if you come over here and look at the links on the valve gear, I noticed this yesterday. kind of blew Jason's mind a little bit. There must have been some sort of a connection between the LNA/KCS and the Illinois Central, because on both sides, that's where these links came from.
Right, and yeah, and Nick gets mad props for me on that because I didn't notice, to be quite honest.
Hey. It happens to the best of us, right?
Yeah, right, absolutely. Every day we should try to learn something new. If we don't, then, well, then that's just sad.
And you know, that's the great thing about getting to really look closely and hard at a locomotive like this, is you start picking up little intricacies like this that, you know, to the untrained eye, or from 20 feet away behind this fence, normally you wouldn't see this kind of stuff. And now, to history geeks like Jason and I, you know, that kind of stuff matters. To the general public, not so much. But regardless, it is a part of the locomotive's history, and it's fun to work that stuff out.
Absolutely. So Justin Sobeck asks if it had a smoke density indicator. He said a smoke light.
A smoke light.
If you look right up there at the top of the stack, you can see several bolts. I would assume that it did, but obviously at some point it was taken off. So, yeah, so for everybody that's now watching, because we've got a bunch more videos than we did before, trying to save this locomotive, we're out here marking parts for salvage, just in case the rail preservation world fails to come through and help raise the $50,000 necessary to get this locomotive out of here to a safe harbor, so that it can then be restored for service on the Orlando and Northwestern Railway, which would begin later this year. Later this year, that project would start. We've got to get it out within the week.
Currently, the GoFundMe is currently sitting at $8,531, including a $500 offline pledge we've got waiting in the wings. That brings us up to just over $9,000. Guys, that's a grand short of the moving cost for this thing. Let's keep it up. Let's keep it going.
Right.
We're this close to getting this locomotive out of this park and safe and potentially back on the rails.
Absolutely. No, not even potentially. Not even potentially. It is a guaranteed. It's guaranteed. The Orlando and Northwestern wants this locomotive.
All right.
They want to run it. They will fund putting it back into service. It's just a matter of timing. That can't begin until much later in the year. But they're interested. That's the plan. That is a plan, and that's all that matters. We've got safe storage at the Texas State Railroad Museum, thanks to Greg Udoff. We have trucking being provided at cost by Jimmy Laziak with over-the-top construction. That's phenomenal. All we have left are the crane costs, the purchase cost, and that's it. I mean, we basically have the money raised for moving it.
Yeah.
The actual trucking component.
Absolutely.
We need the purchase cost and the crane cost. And the purchase cost, worst case, is about $18,000. The crane costs, worst case, are about $5,000 at each end. Worst case. It's better to, you know, be surprised and not need all of the money. And if anybody's wondering what will happen to the any leftover funds associated with the extrication of this locomotive from the park will go to the not-for-profit created to care for it, and ultimately be put to its restoration. So let's see, there's more things coming in. Let's see, Justin Sobeck says also the Louisiana and Alabama and Louisiana Midland intersected with the Illinois Central in a few places. So that might explain the ICRR parts. Could be. I mean, you know, you get into railroads that even interchange with each other, and you can get some pattern sharing and even parts purchases if they happen to be the same. Justin, are there any locomotives that that the Illinois Central had that were of nominally the same design? I have no idea. You're good at that stuff. Brian Allison, let's see. When the locomotive was moved to Port Arthur, the bell was taken off and stored at the Port Arthur Police Department to keep anyone from getting it. The big question is it still there? Well, you know what, Brian? I've got no idea, but I promise you that we'll check into that, assuming the preservation world is successful in raising the funds for this. And again, GoFundMe site is in the description of this news feed, or this live feed. It's not a news feed, of this live feed. highly suggest, encourage everybody to donate. It's too late in this country's like history and the preservation era for a mainline locomotive to be going to scrap. It really is. It's just, it'd be a travesty, especially since it has a home and a future, a defined future. Timing is just not what it needed to be for the Orlando and Northwestern to actually help right at this very moment. But you know, all we have to do is get it out of the park. You know, this is a great example of how collaboration through different entities can play an incredible role in keeping our history from becoming lost, forgotten, and in this case, you know, razor blades or whatever. You know, it's amazing that people have been coming forward from multiple different steam operations, museum operations, whether they be management folks or just employees. There have been a number of people who have donated $500 to this endeavor each. And, you know, that's really helped everything kind of skyrocket. Did you spray the red? You did spray the red on all the pipes, and
I did.
Okay, unfortunate. So,
just in case.
Yep, just in case.
Guys, don't let it come to this. I don't want to have to come back and pick up parts that have been torched off at our red marks. Seriously. I'd rather work on an intact locomotive.
It's just not necessary. It can be done. We're a fifth of the way there. Let's just round up to $10,000. We're a fifth of the way there in less than 24 hours. That's unheard of. That kind of fundraising for any kind of a steam locomotive, rail preservation, whatever project is just absolutely unheard of.
I don't think it's ever happened before.
Not that I'm aware of. And I'd like to think I'm pretty in tune with these things, but I mean,
right.
You never know. I mean,
you are that steam guy after all.
Well, I do sleep sometimes, so you know. I really don't keep up with this stuff as much as I should probably. Oh, look at this. I didn't even notice. They replaced the bottom half of the smoke box at some point. There's a weld seam right about, hey, look at that. I can use my finger to, yeah, right there. And on the same side, right there. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but somebody in the not too distant past decided to try to steal the number plate, and it didn't go so well for them. They actually
I'm guessing
broke
they
it
were
off.
more after the brass than they were the actual number plate.
Probably.
Because, they happened to get the outside of it. All they left was just the 0 in the middle, right over the mounting spatula.
Right.
That's unfortunate, but thankfully enough Baldwin number plates have been remade in this country that patterns are available, and it's honestly not that difficult of a pattern to make. A couple friends of mine at the Hocking Valley have actually done the same thing for our locomotive. So, just one of those.
And we've already had somebody donate. There's a friend of ours, a friend of Nick's, an acquaintance of mine who donated $503, and has the number plate from one of the sister engines.
I believe 508.
508.
That was Dale Roberts, if I remember correctly.
Right. So how easy will it be to you know, copy that number plate and just turn the 8 into a 3, and
Absolutely.
boom, we've got a copy of the number plate. Granted, you know, that's kind of right up there with discussing what kind of whistle it's going to run with. It doesn't really matter. but it's nice. It's really nice. It's really nice, you know. So yeah. So let's see other little features of this engine. Anybody have? First off, who is Pete Waterman? Duncan Major. Who is Pete Waterman? If $50,000 is pocket change for him, send him our way. There's a Trains Newswire article about this. Jim Wren called us up and interviewed us this morning, wrote it up. He actually went into the office today just so he could run the Newswire story.
Jim Wren, you're a heck of a guy and a serious help to the preservation world. Bless you, my friend.
Yes, he is. He always has been. He's been one of my favorite people in this industry since I first met him in 1992. I was 14 years old and volunteering on a Norfolk Southern steam program trip operated by the Atlanta chapter of the NRHS. Now, Nick, make me feel really old. How old were you in 1992?
1992. What month?
Would have been November.
November of 92. I would have been 2 years old.
So here's Nick. Here's Nick. Love having you around, man. Love having you around.
It's great to be here.
He was 2 years old. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, God. I turned 40 this year. Isn't that spectacular? Somebody surprised me and put together a hell of a party.
Hey, in a decade, we can push you over the hill. So get
the hill?
the hill.
All right. It's an inside joke.
Oh,
Not a very good one either. So, anywho, so for everybody that wasn't around yesterday in the live stream, we did spot check UT measurements. You know, part of a federally mandated inspection, 1472-day inspection. It's not just that it's mandated. I mean, after all, I don't want to go boom. He doesn't want to go boom. It's a really good thing. So as part of the federally required inspection, how I always like that, required, whatever, inspection, you have to go through and you lay out an ultrasound grid on the entire boiler, right? So I was actually demonstrating what the grid looks like for a local newspaper fellow. If anybody has seen the articles in the paper, the fellow that's been writing those happened to stop by here about 2 minutes after we got here and talk to us for a bit. But anyway,
that guy, name was, what was his
Nick
name?
Nick will get it, and find the newspaper name too, so we can tell people.
It is the News is the name of the newspaper. Quite original, actually.
Port Arthur, the News.
Port Arthur News, yes.
Okay.
The guy's name is Ken Stickney. He's been writing the newspaper articles.
Say it again. A truck came by.
Sorry. The reporter's name is Ken Stickney. He's been writing the articles since this broke to the preservation world. Honestly, if not for him, I don't think any of us would have known about this until this thing was already in a dumpster on its way to the melt shop.
Okay.
So,
he's right.
All it takes is one person paying attention to keep an eye on this kind of stuff.
Right. And so anyway, yes, absolutely. And so, you know, when you go to rebuild a locomotive, like the firebox, there's not an actual particular requirement. Generally, they like to see no less than about a 1 foot square grid pattern. On the firebox areas, because they're a little bit more prone to irregular corrosion, yada, 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 I like to do an 8-inch pattern personally. Whatever, that's neither here nor there. Point is, even at that, there are areas that are generally really bad. We took some readings up higher, we took some readings back there, and we took multiple readings right at the top of the mud ring. Because oftentimes what happens, I'm going to try and reach for a piece of soapstone in my pocket. All good Boilermakers should always carry soapstone. Right. Nick has soapstone in his pocket.
I do.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at this through a cross section, if this is the mud ring, right, and here you have your outside sheet, hopefully it's straighter than that, what oftentimes will happen is right at the top of the mud ring, you'll get like a crevice corrosion going on, and it'll thin out right at the top of the mud ring. And the only thing you can do to repair that is cut the sheet out above the corrosion and replace it. Luckily, this locomotive is not suffering from that. While there is some material reduction, it's in the neighborhood of about 20 to 30 thousandths, which is absolutely nothing for this sheet thickness. It calcs up, it calcs out to a T-min of somewhere around 320 or 330 thousandths or so. And well, as you can see right here, we're at 526 was the thin part with an original sheet thickness of 9/16, which it's amazing that after all the time this locomotive has been in service that it actually still shows up the original sheet thickness. What else? The interior of the firebox, again, for those who were not with us last night or haven't seen the other live stream, the interior of the firebox reads entirely at 3/8 of an inch. Here you go, Nick. I'm going to hand the camera to you. It's a lot easier.
Right. This locomotive currently lacking tender steps, which actually I believe one of them's laying over there under the brake lever. A little difficult to get up into.
Which, by the way, you know, I'm not just a history geek. I like video games too. So you know,
classically trained.
Absolutely. And I think it's a nice play on words with the trained part too. I know. I try to be, but rarely successful. So anyway, the entirety of the interior of the firebox is in really great shape. Really great shape. Didn't get a single reading that was below 3/8 of an inch, except for one little spot, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to see anything because we don't have light, but you can look at the video feed from yesterday. And again, in the comments, GoFundMe, go to the page, donate, donate, donate. I've donated, Nick has donated.
Absolutely.
Rick Rollins has donated. For anybody who doesn't know him, he does Youngstown Steel Heritage.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And talk about what this guy has saved, basically on a shoestring, on his own.
Oh my goodness. Rick Rollins, back when he was younger than me.
So like 12.
Well, right. In his early 20s, Mr. Rollins got it in his head that he wanted to save this big, massive stationary steam engine from Youngstown Sheet and Tube. So we got a group of guys together and managed to save a 260-ton, 4,000 horsepower stationary rolling mill engine out of Youngstown Sheet and Tube. Went to go work for CSX for a while, worked for Ohio Central, got the money to buy a piece of property to build a building, and has since created the Youngstown Steel Heritage Museum. We completed the cosmetic restoration of the Todd in time for its 100th birthday in 1914. And in the meantime, we've been finding some other rather interesting projects. Rick stumbled across a extremely heavy, actually it weighs about as much as this thing does.
Builder's plates are gone, Brian.
Extremely heavy 2-foot gauge Porter 040 saddle tank. We've dubbed it the rolling ingot because it's basically a solid chunk of steel.
It is. I mean, if you go to the site, highly encourage, cross promotion here. Go to the Youngstown Steel Heritage site, or there's a rolling ingot Facebook page.
J&L narrow gauge railroad.
Right.
That's the 2-foot gauge railroad we're building on site. Hopefully, at some point later this year, we will be we'll have 58 back in operation. If not, we'll be running trains with the Brookville locomotive we've spent the winter rebuilding. That was a donation, a de-accession from the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania.
Tim Doherty, just scroll down through my page. You'll see multiple news articles covering the topic.
Right. But yeah, I mean that's really the most I want to take up about it right now. I could go on for
it's worth it. No. It's and by all means, but answering questions of the feed. But no, this locomotive, my God, this thing is just solid metal. This rolling ingot.
It is probably the most dense steam locomotive currently in existence.
But in a good way.
Absolutely. This is a 2-foot gauge. So think like
Mike Brown. The flexible sleeves are all pretty well shot. They'll all be replaced.
They're bad. Yep. They're bad.
But the parent metal that they go into is perfect. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a 2-foot gauge 040 with the same axle loading as an Alco S2. You're looking at about 17,500 pounds of tractive effort, which is just phenomenal for a locomotive of that size. So Rick Rollins doing big things with little engines in Youngstown, Ohio.
Right. Anybody in the area, go check them out. Support that museum as well. We've got to start caring about our history. I had to finish off the thing about the firebox. Out of the entirety of the firebox, Mike Brown asked this question. Also, Alex Shapiro, what type of locomotive is this? This is a Baldwin-built 1913 460. It was built for the Louisiana and Arkansas. It's a really beefy 460. You probably, if you're asking what type of engine it is, I'm assuming you probably know a little bit about them. It's a pretty beefy engine. This thing, as little as it is, develops, or as little as it seems, develops 40,000 pounds of tractive effort. That's huge.
It's got piston valves. It's superheated. It's just... If there ever was a short line superpower locomotive, this was it.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great analogy.
Jason said this the other day. He might have mentioned it in the live feed last night, and I'll echo his sentiments. If anybody had ever come to me and asked if there was a 10-wheeler this size, with over 30,000 pounds of tractive effort still extant, I'd say no way. This really has just been an absolute diamond in the rough.
Absolutely.
It's got huge prospects, as we've seen. So,
and one of the really exciting things about this project, yes, donate. Go fund me in the comments. Save this engine from scrap. It has an operational future if it's gotten out of the park.
Yes.
As a motorcycle, probably blurred all that out. Donate, GoFundMe.
Yes.
Already have a fifth of the money raised in less than 24 hours. We have about 3 days left.
Right.
Go.
You know, huge shout out to the people that have been involved so far. Jimmy Lesiak with Over the Top Construction out of Cleveland, Ohio. He's come down here and offered to move this thing to the Texas State Railroad to its new temporary home to get it out of the park at his cost. So, no profit. Big shout out to Jim Wren for going into the office today on a Saturday. Jim, bless you. Putting out a Newswire article for us and getting this a lot more on the map. And a decent shout out to the local paper, too, that's really decided to put the spotlight on this locomotive as well.
And to the city of Port Arthur for getting us in contact with the environmental remediation firm that does now hold the rights to the locomotive. And his help, his job manager's help, they've been great people to work with. They don't want to see the engine go to scrap. The guy's kind of an old iron head in the sense of he likes old metal, not in other positive, negative commentaries of what I just said. But anyway, he really likes old iron. But yeah, you know, it's just a great engine and it has an operational future. There is a plan, there is a destination, there is an end goal. We just need funding to get it out of the park. And once out of the park and there's time to put everything in place, it will be turned over to a not-for-profit entity. Now,
oh my God. Look at that stud.
Oh, that's a great visual. So, Mike Brown had asked, what about the local TV folks, Mike? Apparently,
unless there's a shooting, they don't run a news story
or something major. Yeah.
They don't run a news story until Monday. So
right.
Hopefully Monday morning we'll be getting a phone call from the number of local stations that we've contacted.
And if we have to run back down here, we have to run back down here. It's worth it.
Right.
We're just 6 hours away. And so, you know, and it should be pointed out too, yes, I'm a contractor. Nick is working with me. We are not profiting from any of this. I am doing this because I'm a preservationist. Nick is doing this because he is a preservationist.
Absolutely.
We're paying for all of this out of our own pocket. We're down here on our own dime, etc. So Mike Brown asked a question about the wrapper. The wrapper, there's flaky rust, there's no heavy corrosion. Look at the line where the roof hatch is. The roof hatch ruptured. Well, ruptured, rusted away, whatever. And it is out ahead of the line of the backhead. The backhead begins back here. So it's just the backhead that's seen deterioration. And that is the one part of this boiler that will actually need to be replaced. The whole backhead needs to be replaced, but that's not as monumental as it sounds. Really, it's pretty straightforward in the course of doing a rebuild on a locomotive anyway. It's just metal. We did it on the 4501. Lessons were learned. There was kind of some developmental processes put together, or there were processes put together developmentally for replacing the backhead on the 4501. Those have been learned from and will be replicated here. And a majority of this here, I'm going to draw some things out for people. So when we go, and I know you're used to seeing me in my black pants and my blue shirt. It's just my work attire.
We dressed like this in the thoughts today that we may be on TV. So Jason's looking a little spiffy.
Actually, I would have put a blue shirt on over this because this is just a little whatever. Anyway, so the way this will be replaced, there's a company that I have as a vendor who makes spun heads. So what that means is they take a big flat piece of steel, right, and they put it on a machine that spins it and rotates it. And as it rotates it, at the edge of the sheet, there's a roller that progressively bends the metal over, flanges it over. They can vary the radius of that and the length of the tangent, the straight part, after the radius. Now, so we have a spun head made. It's really not that expensive. A spun head of this diameter, because this is round, all the way till about here or so, right here. A spun head of this diameter, of this thickness, is only going to cost something in the neighborhood of about $5,000, if you can imagine that. It's really inexpensive in the scheme of things. So what we'll do is we'll take a spun head and cut it pretty much straight across here, And then from that line down, we'll make the bottom part of the door sheet, of the back head. Door sheet's on the inside for those that don't know. Apparently I need to crack a hook too. I mean, it happens to everybody, right? So we'll flange the bottom part of the back head on a McCabe flanger. And see, one of the really neat things, you know, for anybody that's looked at my page, you know, it's really amazing how much interest there is in this post that I did last Saturday has 4 million views, has reached 5 million people. There is real interest in this stuff. It's presented in an interesting way. I don't consider this interesting. This is us trying to like save this thing. But point is, I have absolute transparency. I know the people that want to rebuild this want absolute transparency. It will be the opposite of pretty well every steam locomotive restoration that has taken place to date in this country. We will have these live feeds explaining things that are going on, taking questions. We will have video updates. It will be the most digitally represented steam locomotive restoration that has for sure taken place in North America and possibly the world. But, you know, it's got to be a first, right? So this thing, you'll get to see every aspect of what's going on, every aspect of what's, you know. So you got to donate. Now, you know, in the comments section, there's a GoFundMe page. Go to that. Throw a couple dollars in. Every single person. If everybody who has shared the GoFundMe page to Facebook had donated $100, we would already have $40,000. We've had over 400 shares. And so if everybody who shares it donates $20 and gets 4 other people to who they know, we'd be there. We'd be there. So the thing you have to keep in mind is, you know, our history is fading away. Our history is being scrapped. It's being thrown away. Buildings are torn down, etc. This locomotive almost got scrapped. May well still get scrapped if we don't save it, because the city didn't know that there's a preservation community. They did not know that there was a heritage community. That
Brian Allison just donated on the GoFundMe. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I see a comment here from him. He says, years ago, before it was fenced, there was a homeless man that attempted to build a fire in the cab. The end result was the entire cab burnt.
Really?
That would really explain why there's no wood left in this cab. Got another question here from Russell Newman. Does the boiler need to be lifted out at all? As Jason has already explained, whenever we go to move this locomotive to the Texas State Railroad, should we be successful,
should the preservation community be successful in saving this?
Right. Should this effort be successful, the boiler will be lifted clear of the frame. That's going to require crane work, and it's the easiest way to move it is to break it down into.
The problem is this locomotive weighs 194,000 pounds. So nominally, it weighs what would that be? 97 tons.
Yeah, okay. Somewhere around there.
So it weighs 97 tons. That is an excruciatingly expensive move. But if you separate the boiler from the chassis, you split that nominally in half. You take the pilot truck away, you reduce it a little more, and then they become truckable loads that do not require any special permitting other than maybe over width on the cylinders. Justin, if you're still watching, I still owe you that dimension, and I'll get that before we leave.
We'll get that.
Yes.
Robert John Davis back in for donation number 2 today. Let's get this to. He says 2K today. I think we're probably over
maybe
that.
He means 20K.
Maybe he means 20K. Indeed. I bet he means 20K. But either way, Robert John Davis, thank you so much. David Cerna, where are you located? We are currently in Port Arthur, Texas, in Bryan Park.
So, let's, for those that haven't already seen, for those that don't know anything about how you move a steam locomotive, I did a little walkthrough last night. Let's do a walkthrough and show them where everything gets separated so the boiler can come off the frame.
Absolutely.
Alrighty.
We'll not film the less graceful part of Jason's descent.
Oh yeah, let's not do that.
Here we go.
All right, so Nick, you walk people through. You know the drill. You know the drill on this. I showed you how it's all going to happen.
So, the way this is going to work
See, now you notice how I did that. He was kind enough not to show my less than graceful.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that. So,
much love, much love.
right on. So the way we've described that we're going to separate this the boiler from the frame to move the locomotive. There are, back in here, there's a waste sheet.
Furnace bearer sheet.
Furnace bearer sheet. Here in the back, cut that.
Right, so these that you see contacting the boiler are merely pads that they rest on.
Indeed. So down here, in between the frames, behind the sprig ring, is another furnace bearer sheet. That'll get sliced, but it's just metal. We can weld it back together when the time comes.
Absolutely.
Or replace it.
Right.
Waste sheets here.
So right here, sheet there and there. That one, it's already almost separated itself.
Smaller waste sheets here at the front of the valve gear frame, one on each side. You may not be able to see the one on the other side.
Yep.
And then around.
Do it from the front.
Okay, easier.
Yeah, lighting.
Around the front where the smoke box is attached to the cylinder saddle, just cut out around the edge of the cylinder saddle, all the way around, and then lift the boiler off as one piece.
Awesome. And that's right. That's exactly right. As I discussed last night. Hey, look, 503. It's marked on this side as well, which you'd expect since it was on the other. But this is the same manner that the Sioux 2425 was removed from Enderlin, North Dakota, and shipped to Minnesota. You got it. And the lost engines of Roanoke. They were separated from their frames in the same manner. It works very successfully. It's easy reassembly. In fact, the 4960, the way I came up with the idea, because I helped a little bit with the lost engines and helping them figure out a plan for dismantling them. The idea came from seeing how the little locomotive that came from Bainbridge, Georgia, recently moved up to somewhere in Kentucky. It was a Corbin, Kentucky.
Corbin, yes.
When it was moved to its location in Bainbridge, they cut around the smoke box. So I had seen that. I thought that was a pretty good idea. And I'd always thought, well, you know, you still have to take the time to move all the fitted bolts out of the waste sheets and the like. And then I saw the way Robert Franzen removed the 4960's boiler from the frame, and he had gone in and he cut the waste sheets or had somebody do it, and then they welded them back together. Easy peasy. It worked great. So again, GoFundMe in the comments. Go to the GoFundMe page.
GoFundMe is currently sitting at $8,789. So including that $500 pledge, we are even closer to $10,000 to get this thing moved. Let's keep it going, guys.
$9,200.
And can we get on from there? Let's do it.
We've got to. As a community, as an industry. For many people, I often hear people use the word hobby. For history to survive, it cannot be a hobby. It's got to be an industry. No matter how much we enjoy it, no matter how much we're into it, it's got to be an industry. And you know, it's just it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. So anything you can do. Any donation is appreciated. Any donation helps, for that matter. We do not want to have to see these appliances removed from the locomotive as it's being scrapped, and there's no need for them to be. There's a lot of people right now. There's 1.1 thousand people watching this feed. 1.1 thousand.
Even if you each gave $1 a piece, there were another grand closer to where we need to be. Anything helps, guys. $1, $5, $20, anything up from that. It all adds up. This is a cumulative community effort. Let's keep it going, guys.
And you know, again, like I said earlier, in the comments, GoFundMe, make a donation, get your neighbors, get your coworkers, get your friends, get your relatives to make a donation. Get your husband to, get your wife to.
Whoa.
Hey, well, you know, I've got like 10% female viewership on my page, and I'm really proud of that. I love the fact that there is a fairly decent, I mean, I'd love to see it larger, but there's a fairly decent demographic of women that are interested in the kinds of things that I post, because, you know, women all over the place have expressed interest in this kind of stuff to me, and it would be great to see more women involved in the industry that we all participate in. So anyway, you guys get the idea. We've got to save this locomotive. It'll be moved from the park to the Texas State Railroad. It will be housed temporarily there while final details are worked out to be rebuilt for the Orlando and Northwestern Railroad in Florida. Jimmy Lesiak of Over the Top Construction, and believe me, if you've ever met Jimmy, he's just
certainly over the top.
he is one of the most wonderfully animated people I have ever met, and for that coming from me says a lot. But sorry, you'd think I was a smoker. I'm really not. Fired lots of engines recently, but not a smoker. Anyway, so yes, it will be rebuilt. There is a plan. Get it from the park, temporary storage, rebuilt for tourist railroad service. This locomotive is no different than any other locomotive with a defined future. While in a much poorer state of repair, this locomotive is no different than the NNW 611 when they launched their fundraising campaign in, what was that, 2013, I think? And it went out and ran a little bit. This locomotive has a identical future, perhaps lighter weight, lower speed, slightly, but it has an identical future. It has a defined future. We only have to save it from this park. So anything anybody can do, contribute to save this one-of-a-kind machine, or else it will fall victim to the scrapper's torch next week. Next week, people, got to prevent this from happening. Like I've said before, I've contributed people from across the industry, from Ross Rowland to Robert Franzen, Jason Johnson, Stephen Harvey, Robert John Davis, Aaron Farmer, Greg Udolph, all these people. I can't name them all. I mean, it's too long of a list. I have already stepped forward to help to prevent this locomotive from disappearing and losing an example of this type of artifact. Again, it's the year 2018. We cannot let a mainline steam locomotive get cut up. It's just ludicrous. So anything you can do, please help. Get your friends to help. Get your family to help. You know, call your friends. Call your coworkers. Get them to go to GoFundMe. Drop $10, drop $20, $50, whatever, and prevent this locomotive from disappearing and missing its opportunity to be rebuilt and operate. And oh, by the way, Nick over at the Roundhouse podcast just sent me a link. An interview I did with him earlier today is just now gone live. So go to the Roundhouse, go to their Facebook page, it's the Roundhouse, and listen. It's probably a lot less stumbly and just, you know, yammering on and on. Definitely, if anybody wants to know exactly what the deal is with this locomotive, you can find out through that. You can forward them the link to the page and not subject them to watching this whole thing. So anyway, Port Arthur, Texas. All 284,000 pounds of this beautiful 10-wheeler, 40,000 pounds of tractive effort, built in 1913 for the Louisiana and Arkansas, painted up for Kansas City Southern. Almost got scrapped. The only reason it didn't get scrapped is because of the torrential rains last week. They could not be out here working. By the time the story showed up on RYPN, Railway Preservation News.org, I believe, if it had not been for the rain, by the time the newspaper article was shared, it literally would have been halfway cut up last week. Wait, no, this is Saturday. Technically this week. But anyway, it would have been cut up nonetheless, however you want to slice it. So, we've got to make sure that it doesn't come any further apart. For anybody that's wondering, because I've gotten multiple questions from people about did the abatement company damage anything on the locomotive in the course of removing the asbestos? And I talked about this last night, actually, as well, and I have seen some real butcher jobs jacketing off of locomotives. These people did such a beautiful job. I could not ask for a better abatement job, especially an unguided one. These people just came in here and did their thing. They did not destroy anything. They didn't damage anything that matters. They cut a couple pipes. Pipes are nothing, obviously. They did an extraordinary job, did not damage anything on this wonderful locomotive. So anyway, I will let everybody go. 1.3 thousand viewers. If everybody viewing donated just $10 and got another person to donate $10, we would be so very close to our goal. So very close to our goal. And you know, as these things do progress, the more money there is, the more attention they get, the more people donate. So be a part of saving this machine, and then come ride it. Come ride it. Come ride behind it in Florida. And in fact, anybody, details forthcoming, but you know, we will be doing any number of things with this locomotive, including you know, cab rides and that sort of thing. Anybody who donates over $1,000 with scheduling, yada yada yada, all that, you know, because you got to plan for these things. But anybody who donates over $1,000 to get this locomotive out will be guaranteed a day-long cab ride. A little bit of motivation. Come ride this beautiful locomotive for a day in Central Florida. What a spectacular thing that would be. What a great way to spend a day. It doesn't have to be in the middle of summer. In fact, I'd suggest it's not in the middle of summer because it gets kind of warm there. But anyway, gotta help save this magnificent machine. Everybody have a wonderful day. 1.1 thousand viewers right now. I so very appreciate the interest. I've said before, just in case there's any new people, while I am a contractor and I do work on steam locomotives professionally, I am not being paid to be here. I am not financially benefiting from this whatsoever. Nick Hovey, who had to take a phone call, and I are here on our own dime, trying to see that this locomotive does not get cut up. And with your help, we can do it. Thank you ever so much. Share, and encourage. Thank you, everybody.